Yeah, there's a.
Right.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
There was, I would have.
I was like, I'm a great
can't,
friend.
but
I've done it many
I
times.
You can if you want.
You want?
Yeah, sure.
Wait, which one?
Maybe we can do like partial.
Mock trial timekeeper. I'll get that out.
There you go.
Wait, can you wait? Oh.
I did expressly say that she didn't like that.
Oh, Emily doesn't like light.
Yeah, that's the
Please put it down.
Wait, how much time is it?
20 minutes for direction process, 14 minutes for stations. Instead of the typical 25.
Day of life.
This makes me sad. Okay, I'll pretend.
Halfway through last round, I was thinking to myself, like,
Can
it
you
is
yell?
actually 8 o'clock at night.
Is everyone here?
I think everybody is here. I think we're ready to start.
Can I yell at them?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. All right, calling the case to order of United States v. Augie Shepard. Can I get appearances first, starting with the government?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Tristan Peterson, and today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Ms. Neha Mahesh,
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
and by U.S. Deputy Marshal Connor Wright.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We represent the people of Midlands in today's case, and after opposing counsel has made their introductions, we have a few housekeeping matters we'd like to attend to.
Defense.
Afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Annika Saraf, and today I'm joined with my co-counsel, Mr. Brian Migliaccio.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Together, we represent the defendant in this case, Mr. Augie Shepard.
Understood. State, do you have any pretrial matters before we move to openings?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we've prepared a bench book for the court's convenience for today's case. This includes relevant information, such as pretrial orders and case law. It has been shown to opposing counsel. Permission for co-counsel to approach and tender.
Granted.
Next, Your Honor, we'd like to note something about Exhibit 5. Exhibit 5 is an expert report regarding organized crime, and per Stipulation 8, if you want to open that bench book,
Go on.
Exhibit 5, Stipulation 8 is going to be on the first page.
Understood. Keep talking. You're good.
Exhibit 5 is admissible without objection in today's case.
Is that your understanding as well, defense?
Yes, Your Honor, that's our understanding.
All right, the court shall take note.
We'd also like to clarify something for the record, Your Honor. Throughout today's trial, we will be referring to the mob. We would like to note for the record that when we say the term mob, we are referring to organized crime and not any other meaning of the word.
Are you okay with that stipulation, defense?
We're okay with that, Your Honor.
All right, the court takes note of that stipulation when the government's referring to the mob.
Next, Your Honor, we'd like to invoke Midland's Rules of Evidence, Rules 603 and 615, which constructively swear in and sequester witnesses, barring party representatives. We'd like to delegate Connor Wright as our party representative at this time.
He is so designated. Defense, do you have a party rep?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Shepard is constructively seated at counsel table with us for the duration of trial and is our party rep.
All right, constructively, Mr. Shepard is so designated, and 603 and 615 are so invoked.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, we'd like to ask about your preferences regarding movement about the well, approaching opposing counsel, the witnesses, and the bench.
Feel free to move around the courtroom. All I ask is that if you're approaching an opposing witness, ask permission first before doing so. Other than that, nothing else is necessary.
Yes, Your Honor. Finally, may we assume that objections are heard in a constructive sidebar outside the presence of the jury?
You may.
And with that, Your Honor, the prosecution is ready to move to opening statements.
All right, anything from the defense?
Just one thing, Your Honor. Your Honor, on your bench, you'll have a binder that says an exhibit binder. Your Honor, that contains all the exhibits that may be used in trial today. We just like to note that as those exhibits will come out, we'll make note of those exhibits, which page number they're on for Your Honor's ease. We won't be approaching with a courtesy copy.
Understood. Thank you for letting the court know. Anything else?
That's it, Your Honor. Defense is ready for opening statements.
Opening from the government.
Yes, Your Honor. He spoke up, so they shut him down. Barry Capello works for the mob. He's a part of the De Bruno crime family. But on October 26th, 2018, he chooses to betray that family. He testifies in federal court that he's a part of the mob. He testifies that a man named Augie Shepard is his boss. In exchange for that testimony, Mr. Capello is given a new life and a new identity in Los Angeles. But the mob doesn't forget about Mr. Capello. And 4 years later, they've found him. He sees that old boss, Augie Shepard, prowling outside his work. And less than 12 hours later, Mr. Capello is strangled in his own driveway by that same mob. He spoke up, and they shut him down. And that's why we, on behalf of the people of Midlands, have charged this defendant with murder and attacking a witness. That means that we must prove to you, in today's case, that Augie Shepard intentionally caused the death of Barry Capello, and that he did so because of the witness's previous testimony. We must prove these things to you beyond a reasonable doubt. That is our burden, and we embrace it in today's case because there is only one man reasonably capable of committing this crime. And we're going to prove that to you by asking you to focus on 3 things: the mob, the murder, and the man. First, we're going to talk about the mob. Investigator Connor Wright will take the stand. He'll explain that when Barry Capello testified, he put a target on his back because the mob punishes testimony with death. You'll learn from Investigator Wright that Augie Shepard was a part of that mob, the same mob that Mr. Capello testified against. You'll learn that this was a mob murder. And that brings us to our second point, the murder. You'll hear from eyewitness Bellamy Dempsey, who you'll learn was Mr. Capello's neighbor. She'll tell you that she saw the murder happen. She'll describe to you the expensive, unique sports car that the killer drove, the calm, calculated way the killer behaved, and most importantly, she'll identify that killer. She'll identify him as this defendant. Which brings us to the man himself, Augie Shepard. You see, after we call our witnesses, defense counsel, they might call a few of their own. They might try and provide an alibi for Mr. Shepard, but they won't be able to do that. Because you'll learn that this defendant was there at the scene of the crime. First, you'll hear eyewitness testimony that places him in Los Angeles. Then, you'll see receipts that place him outside of the victim's work. And finally, you'll see forensic evidence that places him at the scene of the crime. We'll prove that Augie Shepard was there, that he shut Mr. Capello down. Now, throughout today's trial, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this defendant. But we ask that you not forget the real reason we're here. We're here because Barry Capello spoke up. He testified. He threw away his life so that dangerous men like Augie Shepard, could be behind bars. He spoke up, and they shut him down. Don't let that sacrifice be in vain. At the end of today's trial, find this defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, whenever you're ready, you may proceed.
Assumptions aren't answers. A man was murdered in his driveway. In the state, well, they wanted answers. So they called up Deputy Marshal Connor Wright and they sent him to the crime scene. They told him to find the killer. In the moment, Deputy Marshal Connor Wright, the moment he stepped on that driveway and he saw who was strangled, he knew who the killer was. He knew the killer was Augie Shepard. Which is why the state, they just came up here and they told you how Barry Capello, he spoke, so he was strangled. But let me tell you more about the man on trial today, Augie Shepard. He'd be the first to admit that he's got a troubled history. But that troubled history, that's not who's sitting in this courtroom today. The new Augie Shepard, he's a husband, a brother, a father. He's a family man. He's a man who works hard. He's a man whose family relies on him, but he's also a man who's been framed. Because the state, well, they made assumptions to get their answer. But in bringing a story like this one to court today, the state, they don't just bring with them that story. They bring a burden to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that one, Augie Shepard killed Barry Capello, and two, he did it because of Barry Capello's testimony. Now that means their story, it can't just be a possible story. The story can't just be likely. Their story has to be the only reasonable explanation of today's evidence. And as the defense, we don't have a burden. We don't have to call a single witness, ask a single question, or make a single statement, but we will. We're going to show you how the state fails to tell their story by highlighting two key assumptions that they make. One, that Augie Shepard, he was at the crime scene. And two, there's evidence proving that he was. You're going to hear from Lauren Shepard, Augie Shepard's daughter, and she's going to tell you how her dad, the last time he went to prison, he made a vow to change. And she's going to tell you how he followed through on that vow, which brings us to Los Angeles, where a man simply trying to take his daughter on a college trip is being accused of murder. And then she's going to tell you that on the night that Barry Capello was murdered, her dad, he was asleep. And there was no chance of him waking up. Then you're going to hear from Dr. Mueller. Dr. Mueller, she's going to tell you that on the night that Augie Shepard was murdered, or the night that Barry Capello was murdered, excuse me, there is phone GPS data that places Augie Shepard all the way across town, across Los Angeles. She's also going to tell you that the forensics evidence that the state, that they have to offer, it doesn't tie Augie Shepard to anything. Which is why Dr. Mueller is going to tell you that the man who killed Barry Capello, it wasn't Augie Shepard. But I don't want you just to listen to what we're going to tell you today. I want you to listen to everything that the state comes up here and says. Every piece of evidence they bring in, every question they ask yourself, is this the full story? The evidence will tell you that that answer is no. Which is why at the end of today's trial, I ask you to listen to my co-counsel, Ms. Saraf, who will stand before you and ask you to find Augie Shepard not guilty. Because the state, as much as they'd like them to be, assumptions, they don't give answers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, state. Do you have any witnesses you'd like to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would like to call Detective Connor Wright to the stand.
All right, Mr. Wright, as a reminder, you are sworn in. In counsel, once your witness is situated, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good afternoon. I'm Detective Connor Wright.
And what exactly do you do, Detective?
Well, I'm a deputy marshal. Have been since 2008, and I was promoted to a criminal investigator in 2016.
What does being a criminal investigator mean?
Well, I can tell you, it entails a lot of training. I'm trained in forensic investigation, witness handling, evidence collection, that sort of thing. But I work in WITSEC, that's witness protection.
What does a job in witness protection actually look like?
Well, my job is to relocate witnesses and give them new identities to keep them safe. I've worked with well over 100 witnesses and personally relocated about 40.
Well, I want to talk about a witness who might be relevant to today's case. Was Barry Capello one of the witnesses you relocated?
He was. I relocated him and his family to Los Angeles in 2018.
Well, why did he need to be put into witness protection?
Mr. Capello was a part of the DeBruno crime family. That's the most prominent criminal organization in Philadelphia. He had testified against the family and landed another member 30 years in prison.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the DeBruno crime family?
Well, I'm far from an expert in organized crime. I work in California. But in order to protect somebody from the mob, you have to understand how the mob works. So I worked with an expert in today's case.
Approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 5, the FBI Organized Crime Report.
If I can have it.
Sure. Approaching the witness with the same. And a courtesy copy for Your Honor.
Please.
Detective, what did I just hand you?
This is one of those reports that I was sent from that expert.
Now, what does this report say about the DeBruno crime family?
Well, it details exactly how it works, specifically with regard to Barry Capello. It outlines the consequences of his testimony.
Well, I want to talk about that testimony a little bit more. What did Barry Capello testify to?
In his testimony, Barry Capello outed several members of the mob. Specifically, he testified that someone named Augie Shepard was the boss.
Do you know if that accusation had any merit to it?
Well, he was far from the only one to say that. 3 other witnesses, according to this report, independently identified Augie Shepard as the boss.
Where are those witnesses now?
2 of them went missing shortly after making their statements. One of them is currently in witness protection, and Barry Capello is dead.
Does that report explain why those disappearances might have happened?
It does. Testifying against members of your family is known as naming names. And in organized crime, the consequence for doing so is well established.
Well, Detective, in the DeBruno crime family, what's the consequence for naming names?
According to this report, death. If the DeBruno crime family were to locate Barry Capello, they would undoubtedly attempt to kill him.
Well, you just mentioned that this would happen if they located Barry Capello. Did that happen?
I believe it did. Barry Capello, on the day of his death, left me a voicemail, and he told me exactly who had found him.
Approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 14, the transcript of the voicemail.
Thank you.
Approaching the witness with the same. And I believe opposing counsel is using one, so we don't have a
Understood.
courtesy.
You say Exhibit 14?
Yes.
You may proceed.
What did I just hand you, Detective?
You handed me a transcript of that memo, of that voicemail that Barry Capello left me.
Does it look to be accurate to what he said into his phone?
It does. This is what I remember him saying.
At this time, the prosecution moves Exhibit 14, the transcript of the voice memo, into evidence.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor, as to hearsay?
Can you explain?
Yes, Your Honor. The statements in this document made by Barry Capello, they're an out-of-court statement that are being used for the truth of the matter. It's not admissible in today's court.
You believe all the statements in here are hearsay?
All except that first one, Your Honor. Call me when you get this. That's a command.
All right, so we're dealing with the second two sentences, right?
Yes.
Any response to hearsay?
Because there's two, I'd like to take those one by one. First, falls under 8033. That's a then existing belief. It talks about Barry Capello saying that he thinks the mob has found him. That's a then existing state of mind or belief. The second one goes to 8031. That's a present sense impression. The word just indicates that he had just seen Augie Shepard, picked up his phone, and left that voicemail.
Any response, counsel, to 8033 and 8031?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll take them one at a time as well. First, that response to 8033. 8033 is very specific in its language. It says that statements that fall under hearsay exception 8033 are not including statements of memory or belief to prove the fact of memory. We believe that the prosecution is using the fact to prove that Barry Capello did think that they found him, and therefore it's not admissible. Would you like me to move on to that second statement, Your Honor?
Please.
That second statement, Augie Shepard just walked by my office window and we made eye contact. That falls under 8031, or I'm sorry, that doesn't fall under 8031, present sense impression. The statement, they just walked past my office window, although it's saying it's something that just happened, we don't believe that enough foundation has been laid to prove that A, Augie Shepard was outside Barry Capello's window, and B, that Barry Capello and Augie Shepard, they made eye contact. That foundation's not on the record, Your Honor.
Understood. State, I'll give you the final word on this.
On the first statement, we would say it does fall to the then existing belief because we're not using this specific statement for the truth of the matter. We're going to have evidence that comes out later, if I may proffer.
You may.
Receipts that show the timeline of what happened that proves that he was in fact there. The mob did in fact find him. We're using the statement from the voicemail to show that Barry Capello thought the mob found him, his belief that he had been found by the mob, to illustrate the urgency of the matter. As for the second statement, we know for a fact it's a present sense impression because we're going to lay that timeline based on the exact timestamp of the phone call in a later question.
Your Honor, if I may respond?
Briefly.
As to that first part, 8033, they do care about the fact that Barry Capello thinks Augie Shepard found him. They care about that fact, and the language of 803 is very specific, meaning that that statement is not admissible. As to the second one, that present sense impression, we believe that the foundation they're going to lay is that Augie Shepard, if I may proffer, Your Honor,
You may.
he went to a restaurant at 12:47 p.m., and then he went to an ice cream shop at 12:52. They're saying that within that 5-minute time span, in that 5 minutes, that's enough foundation to say that that phone call happened at the same time that Augie Shepard saw Barry Capello. We believe that that window is too large of a window, and therefore it doesn't fall under hearsay exception 8031.
All right, well argued by both sides. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to admit the exhibit, but I'm going to redact the sentence, I think they found me. I do not believe that falls under the hearsay exception you cited. So exhibit 14 is received with I think they found me redacted. The rest of the exhibit will be admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Permission to play the voice memo and constructively redact the middle sentence?
Any objection to that?
Yes, Your Honor, as to more prejudicial than probative.
Under 403 to them playing it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Before I hear any more arguments, state, is the voicemail a different exhibit than what we just admitted?
It's technically Exhibit 13, but it's word for word what the transcript says, Your Honor. We're playing it for the jury's benefit.
I'm going to overrule your objection for now, but before you play it, I need you to lay foundation as to how this witness knows about that before the jury hears it.
Yes, Your Honor.
So overruled for now, but lay that foundation.
Could you tell us once again what I just handed you?
Yes, this is the voicemail that Barry Capello left me. I found it on my work phone a day later.
Permission to play that voicemail in court, Your Honor?
Any objection at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, I would re-raise my more prejudicial than probative 403 objection.
Can you elaborate?
Well, yes, Your Honor, we believe that simply having the statement on the record, that's enough for that the prosecution needs. That's all they need. But to play the emotion that could be within Barry Capello's voice, that would be more prejudicial than probative and would mislead the jury. Playing that voicemail, as opposed to just entering it into evidence, doesn't make any fact more or less likely. All it does is inflame the passions of the jury.
State, what's the probative nature of playing this voicemail?
Primarily, it's to make sure the jury is aware of the importance of the matter to Barry Capello. The fact that he felt the need to make that phone call directly, it speaks to the terror of the mob that he had just seen outside his window. It's extremely probative, and moreover, the standard for more prejudicial than probative is a substantial standard, and we would say the probative value of the significance of the mob boss outside his window speaks to a probative value.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
No, well argued. I'm going to overrule the objection. Let them play the voice now.
Call me when you get this. I think they found it. Arnie Shepard just walked my way out this window and we made eye contact.
Does that sound like the voice memo you received?
Yes, that is what Barry Capello left me.
And I want to delve into that a little deeper. Do you know if the defendant was telling the truth about seeing Augie Shepard?
Well,
Objection, Your Honor, is to speculation.
Can you elaborate?
That question calls for speculation. To ask this witness, do you know if Barry Capello was telling the truth in their statement? That calls for speculation.
Any response?
Your Honor, we're asking for this detective's knowledge of the facts and whether that corroborates the voicemail we just heard. It doesn't call for speculation.
What was the question you asked this witness?
Do you know if this defendant was telling the truth in this statement?
And can you proffer what you believe the witness will say?
Yes, the witness will speak to both travel records and receipts that corroborate the fact that Augie Shepard was there at that time, proving that that would have been true.
Your
Okay,
Honor, if I may.
no, as phrased, I'm going to sustain the objection. You can rephrase.
Are you aware of if Augie Shepard was in that area at that time?
Well, I went to check. Some travel records placed Augie Shepard in Los Angeles at the time, but I wanted to narrow down his location. So I used a few receipts that I found.
Would you recognize those receipts in court today?
I would, yes.
Approaching opposing counsel with exhibits 15 and 16.
I could have a copy as well.
Yes. Approaching the witness with the same. And we have a courtesy copy of 15 and
Thank
16
you.
should be in there, Your Honor. Now, do these look like those receipts?
Yes, these are two receipts that I reviewed over my investigation.
What's the significance of these receipts in your investigation?
Well, these two receipts are both signed Augie Shepard, and they're from two different businesses. Now, these two businesses were on either side of the building where Barry Capello was working that day.
At this time, the prosecution moves to enter exhibits 15 and 16 into evidence.
Any objection to 15 and 16?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Exhibits 15 and 16 are so received.
Now, why are the timestamps on those significant?
Well, these two timestamps. The first receipt was at 12:47 p.m. And then that voicemail that Barry Capello left me was at 12:50. Then the second receipt, 12:52.
So with that, what was your conclusion?
I concluded based on those receipts that Augie Shepard was likely in front of Barry Capello's place of work at the time that I received that voicemail.
With that, I want to further explore the timeline. What happened the night Barry Capello died?
12 hours after Mr. Capello left me that voicemail, he was murdered.
Could you tell us what happened that night to your knowledge?
Yeah. I got a call from Mr. Capello's wife. She was distraught. She told me that Barry was dead.
And what did you do after that?
I joined local police at the scene. It hurt to see him there. His safety was my responsibility.
I'm sorry you had to go through that, Detective. Could you just tell us what you saw on the scene?
Of course. It appeared that Mr. Capello had been strangled. The coroner later confirmed that. But as for the rest of the crime scene, it was disappointing.
Well, I want to talk about that crime scene. Why would you say it's disappointing?
I mean, in terms of forensics, practically nothing had been left behind. But even that tells us something about the person who did this.
I want to clarify for the members of the jury, how does no evidence tell us something?
Well, that's hard to do, to leave no evidence. That means no fingerprints, so you probably have to wear gloves. It means no DNA left on the victim, so you can't let him scratch or even touch you. And Barry Capello was 230 pounds. That means that you'd have to best him in a physical altercation and get away without a scratch.
So with all of those details put together, what can you tell us about the killer?
He knew what he was doing. The person who did this,
Objection, Your Honor, it's speculation.
As to what?
For this witness to say he knew what he was doing in terms of leaving no evidence behind, that's delving into the attacker's mindset. There's no way of him to say for certain that he knew what he was doing.
Any response?
Your Honor, this is not speculative. If you saw calculus written on a whiteboard, you can reasonably come to the conclusion that whoever wrote that knew calculus. The same way, if you see no DNA on a crime scene, you can reasonably come to the conclusion that the perpetrator at the crime scene knew how to not leave evidence. They're a professional.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Motion to strike testimony?
So stricken.
What can you conclude about the killer based on the data you collected?
well, I consulted that profiler that I mentioned earlier, the agent at the FBI, to try and get a better sense of who could have done this.
And what did you conclude?
Well, that expert, he looked at the facts in today's case, and he was able to conclude that this looked like a mob killing. And that leads us back to Augie Shepard.
Why Augie Shepard?
This report, it says that Augie Shepard was the boss of the DeBruno crime family.
So what was your ultimate conclusion on Barry Capello's cause of death?
Based on this profile and the timeline of the receipts, eyewitness testimony, and forensic evidence, everything I've found points to Augie Shepard as the person who killed Barry Capello.
Thank you, Detective. No further questions, Your Honor.
Understood. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Whenever you're ready, counsel, you may proceed.
Point of order. How long is allotted for cross-examinations in today's case?
20 minutes. Cool.
Thank you.
Loosely.
Just a moment to set up, Your Honor.
Yeah, take your time.
May I proceed?
You may.
Deputy Wright, refresh my memory. How long have you been a U.S. deputy?
I've been a deputy since 2008, sir.
So that's almost 20 years.
Make me sound old when you say it like that, but yes.
And I'd imagine that in those 20 years, you take pride in getting things right.
I do.
You want to catch the bad guys?
That's always the goal.
It was your job to protect Barry Capello.
It's my job to protect the witnesses who I work with, yes.
But in this case, Barry Capello, he ended up dead.
He did.
So it's safe to say that this wasn't your proudest case.
Far from it.
You wanted to catch the killer.
That's right.
And it's true that the moment you walked on the crime scene, you had a suspect in mind.
I had been left that voicemail that referenced Augie Shepard, that's right.
Sir, you haven't heard that testimony, or that voicemail, before you walked on the crime scene.
That's true.
You only heard that voicemail later that day.
That's right, on the 26th.
So without hearing that voicemail, you walked on the crime scene and you knew Augie Shepard was the killer.
I knew of the past ties, but at that point, I wasn't certain of anything.
He was your only suspect.
He was one of many suspects, sir.
At the time, he was your only suspect, officer.
At that point, the number one person who I was looking to in this case was Augie Shepard.
On June 26th, you tried to locate his whereabouts.
That's correct.
The day Barry Capello was murdered.
Yes, he was murdered that morning.
Before you took a single witness statement,
That's right.
before you even saw the autopsy,
That's true.
before you knew Augie Shepard was in town, he was your only suspect.
Well, sir, at that point I knew that Augie Shepard was in town.
Okay, sir. Now, I want to talk about something you mentioned on the record. You point to this report by Agent Jesse Falkenstein. You still have that in front of you?
I do, yes.
Now, I wrote down something that Miss Mahesh, she asked you on the record. She asked you, why Augie Shepard?
Something to that effect, I believe.
You responded, it's because he's the acting boss.
Yes, it lists that a member of the mob was the most likely person to be able to pull off this crime.
But when Miss Mahesh asked you why Augie Shepard, you said, because it says right here, he's the acting boss.
That's right.
Now, I want to talk about how you came to that conclusion without any DNA evidence. Because you mentioned on the record, there's no DNA evidence proving Augie Shepard was at the crime scene.
That's true.
You didn't find any of his fingerprints,
No, there were no fingerprints at the scene whatsoever.
none of his hairs,
Nothing like that.
nothing to suggest that Augie Shepard had ever been at Barry Capello's drive.
There were other things that suggested that, but nothing so strong as DNA evidence.
Like what, sir?
Like the footprints, sir.
The footprints. Size 11 footprints?
That's right.
Sir, you agree with me, a lot of people have size 11 shoes.
That's true, but when we took Augie Shepard in for questioning, he was wearing size 11 shoes.
Sir, I'm wearing size 11 shoes.
I would have to take your word for that.
But you're not going to put me in handcuffs today, are you?
Well, no, sir.
You put Augie Shepard in handcuffs
That's right, he was our primary suspect.
because he had size 11 shoes.
No, because he was in town and had ties to the victim and was also the mob boss that Barry Capello had testified against.
Okay, officer. Well, I want to talk about another element of your theory. You believe that Augie Shepard's car, it was at the crime scene.
That's correct.
You believe that Barry Capello and Augie Shepard, they got in a close contact struggle.
They did, that's my understanding.
You searched Augie Shepard's car for DNA evidence.
That's true.
You didn't find any of Barry Capello's DNA evidence.
In that car, no. My understanding of how the crime went down is that Barry Capello was never in the car.
But they had that skin-to-skin struggle, did they not?
I can't tell you that.
Augie Shepard and Barry Capello, you believe that they fell to the ground together.
Well, that's right, but the skin-to-skin contact would require that they weren't wearing clothes on the parts of them that touched, I suppose, sir?
Rob, sorry, I'll rephrase. It's possible that some of Barry Capello's DNA could have gotten to Augie Shepard's car.
It's possible, yes.
But you didn't find any.
No, my understanding is the car had been professionally cleaned several times.
That's not the answer to my question, sir. You didn't find any of Barry Capello's DNA in that car.
No, I think it's important that the jury understands why as well.
Okay, sir. Well, I want to talk about what else you didn't find in that car. You didn't find any jumper cables, did you?
No, the jumper cables were missing from the car that Augie Shepard had rented.
You'd be familiar with those jumper cables, right?
I would be familiar with a set of jumper cables, but I can't speak to the exact ones that were missing from the car.
You can't speak to the exact ones that were used to kill Barry Capello?
I could tell if you're saying that the ones that were in Augie Shepard's car were the ones that killed Barry Capello, yes, I can speak to those.
Officer, I have those right here. Approaching, or permission to approach opposing witness with these jumper cables?
Show opposing counsel first.
Of course, Your Honor.
And permission granted.
Thank you.
Would you like me to take them out of the bag, or?
Yes, you can, sir.
All right.
Now, those jumper cables, those are the ones that were used to kill Barry Capello.
These are the ones that we found at the scene, that's correct.
At this time, the defense would like to offer Exhibit 26 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 26 is received.
Officer Wright, these jumper cables, right? You can't tell us for certain that those were the jumper cables from Augie Shepard's car.
No, I can only tell you that these were found at the scene and no jumper cables were recovered from that car.
And that's right, officer. In those jumper cables, the ones that killed Barry Capello, they're from a large manufacturer.
That's true.
Those jumper cables, they're from the company Nylite.
That's correct.
Now, Nylite jumper cables, they're sold online.
Yes, and in retail stores is my understanding as well.
That's right, they're sold in every Walmart.
I can't tell you that, but I believe so.
Sir, they're sold in every Walmart.
My understanding is that they're sold I've seen them sold in the Walmarts I've been to.
That's right. You can't tell this if I have a pair of Nylite cables.
No, I couldn't tell you that.
You couldn't tell us if Miss Saraf, if she had them in her trunk right now.
No, of course not.
Sir, the truth is, anybody could have jumper cables just like the ones found at the crime scene.
Anybody could have bought them, that's true.
And it's true that you don't know that Augie Shepard ever saw Nylite jumper cables in his car.
I can tell you that they were missing from the car he had rented, but I can't tell you what he saw.
You can't tell us what he saw.
I'm not Augie Shepard.
That's right, sir, you're not. But at this time, you'd be familiar with a rental agreement, or I'm sorry, a statement from the rental agency, because you reached out to them,
That's true.
and you obtained a statement.
I did, yes.
Approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 10. Permission to approach the witness with the stand.
Granted.
Your Honor, this is on page 39 of the court's reference.
I'm there.
Officer Wright, that's that statement from the rental agency.
Yes, this is an email that I got after subpoenaing the rental agency.
It's fair and accurate to when you last saw it.
Yes, this all looks the same.
Now, could you take a look with me and read silently while I read aloud the bottom two
Objection,
sentences?
Your Honor, as to best evidence.
Defense, is this an evidence?
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to move Exhibit 10 down.
Glad we got that sorted out. Any objection?
For stipulation, no objections, Your
All
Honor.
right, Exhibit 10 is received. You may proceed.
Sir, it says here, we cannot ascertain when or during whose rental, in reference to the jumper cables, that they went missing.
It does say that.
We began renting the vehicle in January of 2021, and it has been rented to 18 individuals in that time.
That's correct.
So, sir, in the 6 months that that car was rented, those jumper cables could have been missing.
Yeah,
One of the 18 different renters, they could have taken those jumper cables.
they could have gone missing at any point during that time. That's correct.
And one of the 3 times that the car was professionally cleaned, those jumper cables, they could have been taken out
That's true.
and never put back in.
That's correct.
But officer, the jumper cables from the crime scene, they had to come from Augie Shepard's car.
I believe that they came from Augie Shepard's car.
That's right, officer, you believe that. Well, I want to talk about something else you believe. Because you believe that on the night that Barry Capella was murdered, Augie Shepard, he stepped outside the UCLA guest house.
That's correct.
He got in his car.
Yes,
He drove to Barry Capella's house.
that's my understanding.
And then he strangled Barry Capella.
That's correct.
What you don't have today is there's no camera footage of Barry Capella, or excuse me, Augie Shepard leaving that guest house.
That's true. I asked witnesses and nobody was able to testify to that.
There's no camera footage of Augie Shepard driving through Los Angeles.
No, not that I was able to recover.
There's no camera footage of Augie Shepard being in Barry Capella's neighborhood.
No, I checked, I looked around, and nobody had a ring light or anything like that.
Like we've established, you were the officer in charge of Barry Capella.
That's true.
It was your job to keep him safe.
It was.
His new identity, Tom Klein, that wasn't available online.
No, I did my best to keep it off the web.
Objection, Your Honor, as to speculation.
As to what? Can you clarify?
Yes, this attorney is asking for this witness to clarify whether or not certain information existed online. That's outside of his scope of knowledge. He can testify to whether or not he saw it online, but not whether it existed online on the dark web anywhere.
Defense, what was the question?
You know, I asked this witness if this content was available online.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Rephrase to this witness's knowledge.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Wright, you tried to make sure that that content, where Barry Capella lived, it wasn't available online.
That's correct. That's part of my job.
You made sure his address, it wasn't available in the yellow pages.
That's right.
But it's the state belief that Augie Shepard, he drove to Barry Capella's house.
That's correct.
You don't know how Augie Shepard learned where Barry Capella lived.
I don't know that, no.
Okay. I want to talk about one more thing. There was an eyewitness the night of the attack.
That's true. It's Miss Bellamy Dembski.
Miss Bellamy Dembski, she saw the attack happen.
She saw the whole thing.
At this time, Your Honor, permission for Miss Annika Sroff to step down and make use of a demonstrative.
Granted.
I'm sorry, I'm present for the job. Ms. Roth, if you could hold this. Officer Wright, I want to make sure we get this just right. Now, Ms. Dembski, she claims that the night that Barry Capello was attacked, she saw the attacker standing behind him.
Objection, Your Honor, as to hearsay.
Any response?
Your Honor, this isn't hearsay. This witness interviewed Ms. Dembski, and Ms. Dembski's belief is also Officer Wright's belief of what happened on the night of the attack.
I'm gonna sustain the objection, just rephrase, so it doesn't sound like we're parroting testimony onto the record. Stick to this officer's belief.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Officer Wright, you believe that they attacked the victim from behind.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Ms. Roth, if you could stand behind me. The attacker, they then put the cords around Barry Capello's neck.
That's my understanding.
Ms. Roth, if you could do the same. And then they pulled those cords.
That's right.
Ms. Roth, you don't have to do that. After the attacker pulled those cords on Mr. Capello, they fell to the ground.
That's my understanding. They both did.
If Barry Capello had been attacked by somebody behind him, he might have tried to hit his attacker.
Yes, you might have.
He might have tried to pull their hair.
I can't tell you, I wasn't there.
They might have tried to pull their hair, officer.
Might have, sure.
They might have tried to scratch their attacker.
Yes,
It's true that Barry Capello, he was a 230-pound man.
that's correct.
And Augie Shepard, he was 180 pounds.
Yes,
You believe they fell to the ground,
that's right.
but you didn't find a single bruise on Augie Shepard.
I was never able to examine Augie Shepard for bruises.
Officer, you're saying you were never able to examine Augie Shepard for bruises, but you didn't find a bruise on Augie Shepard.
I didn't find what I wasn't able to look for, sir. Augie Shepard didn't cooperate with my investigation.
Augie Shepard, he was the primary suspect of your murder case.
That's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. You didn't try to subpoena him and call him in for questioning?
I tried to call him in for questioning, and he did not reply.
Officer Wright, it's your testimony that you subpoenaed Augie Shepard.
I did not subpoena Augie Shepard, no.
That's right. The primary suspect in your murder case, you didn't think to check him for bruises?
I wasn't able to, sir.
You didn't try to check him for cuts?
I wasn't able to.
After he fell to the ground in a struggle.
That's right.
Officer Wright, I just want to make one more thing clear for the members of the jury. You arrested Augie Shepard.
That's correct.
You took him out in handcuffs in front of his family.
No, not at the time, sir.
You took him out in handcuffs from his home, Officer Wright.
Objection, Your Honor, as to 403, needlessly prejudicial. More prejudicial than probative.
As to what?
This attorney is attempting to villainize Detective Wright by saying he's persecuting Augie Shepard in front of his family. That's completely unnecessary to inflame the passions of the jury against this witness.
Counsel, what's the probative nature of this line of questioning?
Your Honor, we're simply establishing the facts of how Augie Shepard was arrested in today's case. That's extremely probative and relevant to today's case.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection, but stick to what happened, not as much the flowery details for this part of the arrest.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
So to be clear, you arrested Augie Shepard yourself,
That's right.
with no DNA evidence placing at the scene,
That's correct.
no direct tie to the jumper case.
To the jumper cables, no, not at the time.
You arrested Augie Shepard with no direct evidence.
Besides the testimony from Barry Capello that gave him a motive, no, not at the time. We were worried that he was a flight risk.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect examination?
No redirect, Your Honor. We just ask that this witness be excused.
Yes, Marshal Wright, you may retake your seat at counsel table. And does the state have any more witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state calls Miss Bellamy Dembski on stand.
All right. Ms. Dembski, you are sworn in. And counsel, once your witness is all situated, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, my name is Bellamy Dembski.
And what do you do for a living, Miss Dembski?
Well, I'm a celebrity dog walker.
And what does that line of work involve?
Well, I travel across the world to walk the Stars dogs, all the way from Paris to Rodeo Drive. I walk the little pups and make sure they get their exercise.
And how are you involved in today's case?
Well, that's not as fun. I saw my neighbor get murdered. I was there for the whole thing.
Before we get into the details of that murder, I'd like to talk about the victim. Who was that neighbor?
I knew him as Tom Klein, but I guess I didn't know him that well.
How long had Mr. Klein lived in the neighborhood?
About 3 years. He said he was from Brooklyn, but the accent never really lined up.
And what did Mr. Klein do for a living?
Well, he was living the dream. He helped people and their furry friends travel the world. He owned a place called Klein Travel.
Now, you said earlier you didn't know your neighbor that well. What did you mean by that?
Well, Tom, he seemed like the type of guy who liked to play his cards close to his chest.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Any response?
Yes, if I may proffer, Your Honor.
You may.
If this witness was allowed to finish, they would testify that Tom Capello had secrets that she then learned of. These secrets, of course, being that he had a secret identity and was in witness protection as Barry Capello. That is enough to indicate that he seemed like the type to have close guarded personal secrets.
If that was a testimony, that'd be okay, but I believe the testimony on the record was keeping cards close to his chest. So I'm going to sustain the objection. Feel free to rephrase.
Motion to strike?
So stricken.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, you said you didn't know your neighbor that well. What did you mean by that?
Well, I later found out that Tom, he had secrets. A secret past, secret life, a secret identity.
Ma'am, who was Tom Klein actually?
Well, I found out during the course of this investigation, his real name was Barry Capello. He was in witness protection.
Well, with that in mind, I'd like to walk through the events of this murder. When did you first notice that something was wrong?
Well, my little dog, she woke me up at dark 30 in the morning. And you know, they say dogs have a sixth sense for trouble. So I got up and I went to investigate.
And what did you see when you went to investigate?
Well, I saw Tom's car trunk open, light on, and not 2 seconds later, I saw Tom walk out of his house.
Did you see any other cars in the neighborhood?
Yes, I did. I saw a car right across the street. It didn't look like any of my neighbors. Real expensive. It would take me years of dog walking to afford that thing.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
As to what? Can you clarify?
The fact that this car was expensive.
Any response?
Your Honor, this witness can use their rationally based perception to look at a car and tell a general level of expensiveness. 2006 Honda Civic's gonna look different from a Ferrari, and this witness can tell that.
Brief response.
Brief.
Your Honor, as opposing counsel mentioned, you can tell the difference between a Honda Civic and a Ferrari, but all this witness said is that she saw a car. She didn't say the brand, the make, the model of the car. There's no way for her to know how expensive that car would be without that foundation.
Well taken. I'm going to overrule the objection. Just make sure witness sticks to what they saw if they're going to describe something like that. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to focus in on this sports car. Could you describe it to the members of the jury?
Well, yes, like I said, it looked real expensive. It looked like something you might see driving down Rodeo Drive, something like a Ferrari, a dark color.
Now approaching opposing counsel with what's been marked as Exhibit 19. Approaching the witness, same. Would Your Honor like a courtesy time?
Oh, please, yes.
Ms. Dembski, do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yes, I do, sir. It looks like that car I saw that night.
At this point, we move to enter Exhibit 19 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 19?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 19 is received.
Now, ma'am, what makes this car similar to the one that you saw?
Well, if you take a look at that picture there, you see it's the same dark color, same real expensive kind of car, and see that logo there? Also looks kind of like a Ferrari.
Ma'am, have you ever seen a car like this in your neighborhood before?
No, sir, not at all. Look totally different from my neighbors. They don't really drive this type of thing.
And did you ever see a car like this again after that night?
No, sir. It's like it completely disappeared.
Well then, let's get back to the night of the murder. After you saw this car, what happened next?
Well, I saw someone come up behind Tom. He had jumper cables in his hand.
Ma'am, do you think you'd recognize these jumper cables shown to you in court today?
Yes, I would. Have them burned into my memory till the day I die.
Approaching the opposing counsel, what's been marked as Exhibit 26. Approaching the witness, same. There's no courtesy copy, there's jumper cables.
It's for the best.
Now, ma'am, are these those jumper cables that you saw?
Yes. Yes, they are.
And what was this individual doing with those cables?
I never really learned how to use jumper cables, but he wasn't using them right. He took them and he wrapped them around Tom's neck and he just kept squeezing. And you know, the worst thing was his demeanor. It was sociopathic.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation.
Sustained. Just have her stick to what she saw in his face.
Motion to
Let's not
strike.
delve any deeper. So Strickland,
Yes,
you may
Your Honor.
proceed.
The worst thing was his demeanor. His face was just expressionless. And once Tom stopped moving, he just dropped the jumper cables and walked away.
You can set those cables aside, ma'am. I'm sorry you had to witness that. I'd like to try and figure out who might have done this. Did you manage to see what the killer looked like?
I did. Yes.
Could you describe some of his features for the members of the jury?
He looked to be about 40 years old, a white guy in generally an athletic build, and he was a little shorter than you, about 5'11", maybe 180 pounds.
Now approaching opposing counsel with what's been marked as Exhibit 18. Approaching the witness, the same. Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy?
Please.
Ms. Dembski, do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yes, I do. This is a picture the police showed me.
Is it fair and accurate to the last time you saw it?
Yes, sir.
At this point, we move to enter Exhibit 18 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 18 is received.
Ma'am, do you recognize anybody in this photo?
I do. That guy second from the left in the Eagle sweatshirt, that was my neighbor, Tom.
And does anyone in this photo resemble the killer that you saw?
Yes. The guy standing right next to him, that gray sweatshirt, third from the left, that looks like the killer I saw. Same jet black hair, same build, same everything.
And ma'am, do you see this individual in the courtroom here today?
I do. He's sitting right there next to Miss Surratt.
Let the record reflect that this witness has identified the defendant, Augie Shepard.
Any objection?
We actually do have an objection, Your Honor, but
Feel free to elaborate, counsel.
Your Honor, we actually have it on a good faith basis that this witness never actually saw the face of the attacker, and so we don't believe that she's able to accurately identify Augie Shepard to be Augie Shepard, just as the attacker that she saw that night.
All right,
That's the foundation.
Here's what we're going to do for the identification. I think your question was let the record reflect this witness accurately identified the defendant. We're going to have the record state that they identified the defendant, not ascertain as to whether or not it was correct, and they can take this up on cross-examination. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. So, ma'am, in your own opinion, who do you believe you saw murder Barry Capello?
Well, I believe it was that man right there at the end of the table.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Just a moment to set up.
Take your time, counsel.
Mr. Peterson, can I borrow your copies of 18 and 19? May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Dempsey, I just want to clarify for the members of the jury real quick. Is it your testimony today that you recognize this man sitting here today as the attacker who killed your neighbor?
It's the same general characteristics. He looks exactly like this man right here in the picture.
Ma'am, just looking for a yes or a no, is this the person you saw the night your neighbor was killed?
He looks like him.
So is it your testimony today that you saw the face of the person who killed your neighbor?
No, ma'am.
Well, ma'am, when Mr. Peterson was questioning you earlier, you said that you saw the face of the person who killed Tom Klein.
I don't believe that's quite right, ma'am. I don't think I said that.
All right, well, that's what you're telling us, ma'am. But I want to talk about what you actually saw that night. Because it's true, the entire time you saw that exchange between the attacker and your neighbor, the killer had his back to you.
That's true.
So not once did you see this man's face that night.
No.
Not once did you see this man strangle your neighbor.
Well, ma'am, I believe I did see him strangling my neighbor.
Let's talk about why you might be saying that, ma'am. Because, ma'am, when the police showed you this picture, you didn't immediately recognize the man in the gray hoodie and say, hey, yeah, that's the guy I saw kill my neighbor.
No, ma'am, I didn't point him out at first.
But Detective Wright, he pointed him out, didn't he?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
As to what?
As to Connor Wright pointing out this individual, that is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter. Opposing counsel is trying to assert that Deputy Marshal Wright pressured this witness into making an identification, and pointing out that individual is what they are using to assert that statement is true.
I understand you're worried about the assertion, but what's the statement of Detective Wright pointing at a person?
It's actually not a statement in the typical sense, but gestures can still have truth value under hearsay exceptions. Pointing out specifically this individual and the implied question of, is this the person that you saw, that is a statement being used for the truth of the matter.
I want to get it clear, counsel. What's the truth value of the detective pointing at a person?
The fact that the detective was trying to indicate Augie Shepard as the killer.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Dempsey, I'll ask you again. Detective Wright was the one who pointed at this person in the gray hood.
Well, ma'am, he asked me to take a closer look at that picture, yes.
Not just at that picture, ma'am. He asked you about the person in this gray hood.
He asked me if you looked familiar, yes.
He didn't ask you about the other men in this picture besides Tom Klein.
Well, no, ma'am.
He only asked you about the man in this gray hood.
Yes.
And it was after the detective asked you about that man that you were like, I guess that guy looks like the man I saw.
Well, I didn't
Objection,
say.
Your Honor. Hearsay to Ms. Bellamy Dembski saying, I guess that looks like the man I saw.
Any response?
Your Honor, we're using it for impeachment purposes because this witness said she was 100% certain that this was the person who killed her neighbor. We're using it to show a prior inconsistent statement that at the time she was interviewed by police, she said it could have been the guy she saw.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Dembski, it was only after Connor Wright pointed at this individual that you said, I guess it kind of looks like the guy I saw.
Well, I don't think I said it quite like that, but yes, I did point him out, looking like the guy I saw.
Ms. Dembski, just looking for a yes or a no. You said, I guess it looks like the guy I saw.
That's right, that's what I said.
Well, with that in mind, I want to talk about what else you can't tell us in this case. Because, ma'am, you weren't watching this murder happen outside on your driveway.
No, ma'am.
In fact, you weren't even outside at all.
No, seemed a little unsafe at the time.
You were inside your house,
Yes.
behind a window,
Yes.
across the street.
Yes, I was.
And even though you were inside your house all the way across the street, you're telling us you could tell the height, weight, build, and hair color of this individual?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound question.
Sustained. Break it up, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, ma'am, you're telling us that even though you were all the way across the street, you could tell the person's build,
Yes, ma'am.
their height,
Yes, ma'am.
their weight,
Yes, ma'am.
their hair color?
Yes, ma'am.
But, ma'am, let's be clear, because you weren't across the street in the middle of the day when this happened.
No, ma'am, it was dark 0:30.
It was dark 0:30, 12:30 to be specific.
Yes,
It was dark outside.
that's right.
And you're telling us that you could still tell all of these characteristics.
Yes, ma'am, there were street lamps around.
There were only 2 street lamps.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're telling us you could tell all those things.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about something else you mentioned on direct examination. Do you still have that picture of the car?
I do.
And you told us on direct examination that this looked like the car you might have seen.
That's right.
Let's talk about what you can actually tell us. Because, ma'am, when you were looking at that car, you couldn't tell us the license plate,
No.
the make,
No.
the model.
No.
You couldn't even tell the exact color because it was that dark.
No, not the exact color.
So, ma'am, let's be clear here. You are not 100% certain that you saw this car the night your neighbor was killed.
It looks like the car I saw.
That's all you can say, that it looks like the car you saw.
Yes.
You're not certain that it is.
No, ma'am.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. We ask that this witness be excused.
Ms. Dembski, you are excused. And state, do you have any more witnesses?
We have no further witnesses. We rest our case in chief at this time and ask for a brief recess.
Yes, let's take a brief recess. Let's be back at, I'll give you 6, so 3:04.
Yes, Your Honor.